Zara Chen stared at the holographic display showing her new assignment. Earth Academy for Displaced Youth. The irony wasn't lost on her. 3 years ago, she commanded a fleet of 12 warships against the Catherian Armada. Now she couldn't even command respect from teenagers who had never seen real combat. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, and Zara pressed her face against the viewport. Blue skies and white clouds stretched endlessly below. It was beautiful, peaceful, and completely alien to someone who had spent most of her life aboard military vessels in the cold vacuum of space. Her reflection stared back at her, a 16-year-old girl with prematurely gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that had seen too much death. When the Catherians first attacked the outer colonies, humanity was desperate. The enemy was technologically superior, ruthless, and seemed unstoppable. Traditional military leaders fell one by one as entire fleets were destroyed. That's when Admiral Morrison made the controversial decision to promote children who showed exceptional tactical abilities. Zara was 11 when she received her first command. The academy building loomed ahead as the shuttle landed. Students milled about the courtyard, laughing and chatting about trivial things. None of them had ever watched friends die in the void of space. None of them had made decisions that cost thousands of lives to save millions more. Zara envied them their innocence even as she despised their ignorance. "Welcome to your new life," she whispered to herself as the shuttle doors hissed open. The first thing that hit her was the smell. Earth, grass, and something sweet she couldn't identify. Flowers, maybe. On the ships, everything smelled like recycled air and metal. A woman in civilian clothes approached her.
"Zara Chen?"
"I'm Director Williams. We've been expecting you." The woman's smile seemed forced, and Zara noticed how her eyes kept darting to the military decorations on Zara's uniform. Even here on peaceful Earth, her reputation preceded her. "I trust the transition from military service to academic life won't be too difficult," Director Williams continued as they walked toward the main building. "Many of our students come from challenging backgrounds." Zara almost laughed. Challenging backgrounds. These kids probably thought a challenging background meant divorced parents or moving to a new city. They had no idea what real challenge looked like. They'd never had to choose between saving a colony ship full of families or protecting a strategic military position. They'd never watched the light leave a friend's eyes as oxygen leaked from their damaged suit. The dormitory room was small but clean. A single bed, a desk, and a window that looked out over manicured gardens. It was more luxury than Zara had experienced in years, yet it felt like a prison. Her roommate wasn't there, which was fine by her. She'd learned long ago that getting close to people only made it hurt more when they inevitably died. Zara unpacked her few belongings. A datapad with tactical manuals, a photo of her parents who died in the first Catherian attack, and her service medals. She hesitated over the medals before placing them in the bottom drawer. Best to keep that part of her life hidden. These students would never understand. As evening approached, she made her way to the cafeteria. The noise hit her like a physical force. Hundreds of teenagers talking, laughing, arguing about homework and relationships and who said what to whom. On a military vessel, meals were quiet, efficient affairs. Here, chaos reigned. Zara grabbed a tray and loaded it with food that actually looked appetizing. Real meat, fresh vegetables, bread that hadn't been synthesized in a protein processor. Another luxury of Earth life. She found an empty table in the corner and sat alone, observing the social dynamics around her. A group of older students near the center of the room seemed to be the unofficial leaders. They spoke loudly, commanded attention, and others deferred to them. Classic alpha behavior. But they had no idea what real leadership looked like. Real leadership meant making impossible choices and living with the consequences. It meant carrying the weight of countless lives on your shoulders. "Hey, new girl." One of the alpha students, a tall boy with perfectly styled hair, had noticed her. "You're in my seat." Zara looked around the obviously empty table and then back at him. "I don't see your name on it. That's my table. Everyone knows it. Right, guys?" His friends nodded and murmured agreement. A crowd was starting to gather, sensing drama. In another life, Zara would have simply ordered him to stand down. Her rank would have been enough. Here she was just another student, and apparently being a war hero didn't count for much in high school politics. She could fight him, but that would only cause problems. Instead, she stood and picked up her tray. "My mistake," she said quietly, moving to another table. The boy smirked triumphantly and his friends laughed. They thought they'd won something. They had no idea they were dealing with someone who had outmaneuvered alien generals and saved entire star systems. As Zara ate her dinner alone, she began to understand her new battlefield. This wasn't about tactics and strategy anymore. This was about something far more complex and potentially more dangerous, fitting in with humanity's youth after years of being responsible for humanity's survival. The war was over. The Catherians had been defeated, largely thanks to strategies developed by child commanders like herself. But victory had come at a cost. An entire generation of children had been forced to grow up too fast, to make adult decisions while their peers played games and worried about grades. Now those child soldiers were being integrated back into normal society, and Zara was beginning to realize that this might be her greatest challenge yet. How do you become a normal teenager when you've never had the chance to be a child? How do you relate to people who've never faced real danger or real responsibility? Tomorrow would bring classes, new challenges, and the difficult task of pretending to be something she'd never been allowed to be. A normal kid. But tonight, as she lay in her comfortable bed listening to the sounds of Earth through her window, Zara Chen, former fleet commander and savior of colonies, tried to remember what it felt like to be just another student. The alarm that woke Zara at 600 was her own doing. Her body refused to sleep past dawn after years of military conditioning. Around her, the dormitory was silent. Classes didn't start until 0900, which seemed impossibly late to someone accustomed to dawn briefings and immediate deployment schedules. Her roommate, Maya, was still asleep in the other bed. The girl had arrived late the night before, chattering excitedly about some party she'd attended. Zara had pretended to sleep rather than engage in conversation about things that seemed trivial beyond measure. Maya appeared to be around her own age but acted younger, giggling at things Zara couldn't fathom and speaking in rapid bursts about boys and fashion and social media feeds. Zara dressed quietly and made her way to the academy's gym. If she couldn't sleep, she could at least maintain her physical conditioning. The facility was empty except for a few maintenance robots cleaning equipment. She began her routine, the same exercises that had kept her sharp during long space voyages and crucial battles. 50 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, then sprints around the track. Her body moved with mechanical precision, muscle memory taking over as her mind wandered. She remembered training sessions aboard the flagship Defiance, where physical fitness could mean the difference between life and death during a boarding action. Here, students probably exercised to look good in their clothes. Impressive. A voice interrupted her thoughts. Zara spun around to see a man in his 40s watching her from the gym entrance. He wore simple exercise clothes, but something about his posture screamed military background. Most students don't use proper form anymore. Most students haven't had proper training, Zara replied, grabbing a towel to wipe sweat from her face. The man stepped closer, extending his hand. Marcus Reed, I teach physical education and tactical studies. You must be Zara Chen. His grip was firm and she noticed scars on his hands that spoke of combat experience. Tactical studies? Zara asked. I thought this was just a regular academy. Reed smiled grimly. It is mostly. But some of our students have unusual backgrounds that require specialized curriculum. Students who might find regular classes. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Insufficient. Zara studied his face. There was something familiar about his bearing, the way he held himself. You're military. Was Colonel Marcus Reed, formerly of the 3rd Fleet. I served under Admiral Morrison during the Catherian conflict. His eyes sharpened as he spoke the name. I know who you are, Commander Chen. What you did at the Battle of Kepler Station saved my ship and 300 crew members. The formal address hit Zara like a physical blow. Nobody had called her commander in months. For a moment, she felt the weight of authority settling back on her shoulders, the familiar burden of responsibility she'd carried for years. Then she remembered where she was. That's not who I am anymore, she said quietly. I'm just another student now. Reed nodded slowly. Maybe, but you can't unlearn what you know and you can't unsee what you've seen. The question is what you do with that experience. He gestured toward the exit. My tactical studies class meets during 7th period. It's optional, but I think you might find it more engaging than standard curriculum. After he left, Zara finished her workout in silence. The encounter had shaken her more than she cared to admit. Part of her craved the familiarity of military structure, the clear hierarchy and defined objectives, but another part of her desperately wanted to leave that life behind and become something normal. Her first class was ancient Earth history, taught by a cheerful woman who seemed convinced that learning about long-dead civilizations was the most important thing imaginable. Zara sat in the back, listening to discussions about the rise and fall of empires that had turned to dust millennia before humanity even reached the stars. It felt surreal after spending years focused on immediate survival and tactical necessities. Maya slipped into the seat beside her halfway through class, offering an apologetic smile to the teacher. "Sorry I'm late, Professor Jenkins. Overslept." She whispered to Zara as she unpacked her materials. "These early morning classes are killer. How do you look so awake?" "Practice," Zara replied, turning her attention back to the lecture about ancient trade routes and their impact on cultural development. During lunch, Zara found herself sitting alone again. She'd brought a book, a technical manual on starship engineering that she'd modified to look like a novel, and was reading while eating when Maya appeared with her lunch tray. "Mind if I sit? You looked lonely over here by yourself." Maya didn't wait for permission before settling into the chair across from her. "I know we didn't really get to talk last night. I'm Maya Patel. I'm from New Mumbai Colony." Zara looked up from her disguised manual. "Zara Chen, Earth Fleet Academy before this." Maya's eyes widened. "Fleet Academy? Wow, that's intense. Did you wash out or something? I mean, no offense, but most people don't transfer from military school unless..." "Unless what?" Zara's voice carried a warning edge that made Maya shift uncomfortably. "Nothing. Sorry, it's just, you seem kind of serious. More serious than most 16-year-olds, you know?" Maya attempted a smile. "Not that there's anything wrong with being serious. I just wondered if something happened. Something happened. If only Maya knew." Zara had watched entire colonies burn while making strategic decisions that sacrificed some to save others. She'd given orders that sent friends to their deaths. She'd carried the hopes and fears of humanity's survival on shoulders that should have been worried about homework and dating. "Military school is different," Zara said finally. "It changes you, I bet. Hey, there's a party this weekend in the senior dorms. You should come. It might help you, relax a little, meet some people." Maya's enthusiasm was genuine, and Zara found herself almost envying the girl's ability to be excited about something so simple. "I don't really do parties. Come on, everyone does parties. It's like a universal teenage requirement." Maya grinned. "Besides, you need to start somewhere if you want to fit in here." Fit in. The phrase echoed in Zara's mind as Maya continued chattering about the social dynamics of the academy, who was dating whom, and which teachers were strict versus lenient. This was what normal teenagers worried about. This was the life she'd never had a chance to live. Maybe Reed was wrong. Maybe she could unlearn what she knew, at least enough to pretend. Maybe she could figure out how to be just another student instead of a war hero trying to hide in plain sight. But as the afternoon wore on and she sat through classes on literature and basic mathematics that seemed elementary after calculating trajectory algorithms for fleet movements, Zara began to suspect that some bridges, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. The real question wasn't whether she could become a normal teenager. The question was whether she wanted to. The party was exactly what Zara expected. Loud music, too many people crammed into a small space, and the sharp smell of alcohol mixed with cheap cologne. Maya had insisted on helping her get ready, lending her clothes that felt foreign and uncomfortable compared to her usual utilitarian style. The dress was too short, the shoes impractical, and the makeup felt like camouflage for a mission she didn't understand. "You look amazing," Maya said, stepping back to admire her work. No one will recognize the serious girl from the cafeteria. That was precisely what worried Zara. She'd spent years learning to read situations, to assess threats and opportunities, to command respect through competence and authority. Here the rules were completely different. Success seemed to depend on looking right, saying the right things, and caring about matters that struck her as fundamentally meaningless. The senior dormitory common room had been transformed into a makeshift club. Colored lights flashed in rhythm with music that Zara found aggressively loud. Students danced, laughed, and shouted to be heard over the noise. It was chaos, but not the dangerous kind she was trained to handle. This was social chaos, governed by invisible rules she'd never learned. There's Jake Morrison, Maya whispered, pointing toward the tall boy who'd confronted Zara in the cafeteria. He's the student body president and captain of the Zero-G ball team. Basically the most important guy in school. Jake Morrison. The name clicked in Zara's memory. Admiral Morrison had been her commanding officer, the man who'd made the controversial decision to promote children to command positions. Could this be his son? The family resemblance was strong now that she looked for it, the same sharp jawline, the same confident bearing. His dad's some big shot in the military, Maya continued. Jake never talks about it much, but everyone knows his family has serious connections. Zara watched Jake holding court near the makeshift bar, surrounded by admirers hanging on his every word. He was telling some story that involved grand gestures and dramatic pauses, clearly enjoying the attention. When his eyes met hers across the room, his expression shifted to something harder. Well, the mysterious new girl decided to show up. Jake approached with his usual entourage in tow. I was starting to think you were too good for our little gatherings. Just observing, Zara replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. The last thing she needed was a confrontation that would draw unwanted attention. Observing, huh? That's a fancy way of saying you don't know how to have fun. Jake smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Let me guess. Strict parents, private tutors, never learned how to relax? His friends laughed on cue. Zara recognized the dynamic. Jake was establishing dominance, reinforcing his position as alpha by putting her in her place. In a military context, she would have responded with authority. Here she had no rank to fall back on. Something like that, she said, stepping back slightly. The movement was tactical, giving herself space and positioning near the exit, but Jake interpreted it as retreat. See? I told you guys she was all uptight. Jake turned to his audience, playing to the crowd. Probably spent her whole life buried in books, never learned how to be a real person. The irony was staggering. While Jake had been learning social dominance games, Zara had been making life and death decisions for thousands of people. While he'd been worrying about student politics, she'd been outmaneuvering alien fleet commanders. But she couldn't say any of that without revealing who she really was. Maybe we should get her a drink, suggested one of Jake's friends, a blonde girl whose smile seemed predatory. Help her loosen up. I don't drink, Zara said automatically. Alcohol impaired judgment, slowed reaction times, made you vulnerable. The habits of command died hard. Of course you don't. Jake shook his head in mock disappointment. What do you do for fun, mysterious Zara? Besides sitting alone and judging everyone else? The question caught her off guard. What did she do for fun? When had she last done anything purely for enjoyment? Even her reading was focused on technical manuals and tactical studies. Her exercise was about maintaining combat readiness. Her entire life had been shaped by necessity and duty. I read, she said finally, knowing how lame it sounded even as the words left her mouth. She reads, Jake announced to the crowd as if he'd discovered something hilarious. Our mysterious transfer student's idea of a wild night is curling up with a good book. More laughter. Zara felt heat rising in her cheeks, a combination of embarrassment and anger. These people had no idea what she'd sacrificed, what she'd accomplished, what she'd endured. They mocked her for being different without understanding that her differences had helped save their civilization. There's nothing wrong with reading, Maya said loyally, stepping closer to Zara. Some people prefer intellectual pursuits. Intellectual pursuits, Jake repeated in a mock sophisticated tone. Is that what we're calling antisocial behavior now? The conversation was spiraling, drawing more attention. Other partygoers were turning to watch the drama unfold. Zara found herself at the center of a social battlefield she didn't understand, facing an enemy who fought with ridicule instead of weapons. In space combat, when facing superior numbers or unfavorable positioning, sometimes the best tactical option was strategic withdrawal. The principle applied here, too. Excuse me, Zara said quietly, turning toward the exit. Running away? Jake called after her. Typical. Can't handle a little social interaction? Zara stopped. In her peripheral vision, she could see the crowd watching, waiting to see how she'd respond. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around and put Jake Morrison in his place, to show him exactly who he was dealing with. But that would mean revealing her past, and she wasn't ready for that conversation. Instead, she continued walking, pushing through the crowd toward the door. Behind her, she heard Jake make some comment about people who couldn't handle real social situations, followed by more laughter. Maya caught up with her in the hallway. Zara, wait. Don't let him get to you. Jake's just showing off because you're new and you threaten his position somehow. I don't threaten anyone, Zara said, pulling off Maya's borrowed shoes and walking barefoot down the corridor. I'm nobody here. That's not true. There's something about you. Something different. Jake senses it and it makes him nervous. Maya hurried to keep up. You carry yourself like someone who's used to being in charge. The observation was too accurate for comfort. I'm going back to the room. Maya didn't follow, probably returning to salvage what she could of the party. Zara was grateful for the solitude as she made her way back to their dormitory. The night air through the open windows was cool against her flushed skin, and the quiet was a relief after the chaos of the party. Back in her room, she changed into comfortable clothes and sat at her desk, staring out at the peaceful Earth landscape. Somewhere out there, in the cold void between stars, were the ships and stations where she'd learned to command. The people she'd served with would be continuing their duties, maintaining the peace she'd helped win. Here, the greatest challenge seemed to be navigating teenage social politics and pretending to care about things that felt impossibly small after the scope of interstellar war. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts to fit into a world that felt as alien as any enemy territory she'd ever encountered. The tactical studies classroom was different from the others Zara had seen at the academy. Instead of traditional desks, there were workstations equipped with holographic displays and simulation interfaces. The walls showed star charts and military insignias from various human colonies. It felt more like a military briefing room than a high school classroom. Only 12 students attended the optional course, and Zara quickly realized why. The material was advanced, covering strategic planning, resource management, and crisis response scenarios that went far beyond typical academic work. Most of the students seemed older, seniors who were planning military careers or colonial service. Today we're going to examine the Battle of Kepler Station, Colonel Reed announced, activating a three-dimensional display that showed the tactical situation. One of the most decisive engagements of the Catherian War. The enemy had superior numbers and positioning, but human forces achieved a stunning victory through unconventional tactics. Zara's blood went cold. She knew this battle intimately. She'd commanded the human forces. Every ship movement, every tactical decision displayed in the hologram had been hers. She watched her own strategic genius play out in miniature, feeling simultaneously proud and exposed. Who can tell me what the human commander did right? Reed asked, scanning the room. His eyes lingered on Zara for a moment before moving on. A senior named Marcus raised his hand. The commander used the asteroid field to mask approach vectors, making it impossible for Catherian sensors to get accurate targeting data. Good. What else? The sacrificial maneuver with the cruiser squadron, offered another student, drawing the main enemy fleet out of position so the dreadnoughts could target their command ship. Zara remembered that decision with crystal clarity. The cruiser Valiant and her escort ships had drawn enemy fire for precisely 47 seconds before being destroyed. Captain Rodriguez had volunteered his ship and crew for the mission. She'd authorized it knowing they would die. Knowing it was necessary to save the colony ships behind Kepler Station. Excellent analysis, Reed continued. The human commander demonstrated something remarkable: the willingness to accept tactical losses for strategic gains. It's a difficult decision that requires both courage and calculation. Jake Morrison spoke up from the back of the room. Easy to analyze in retrospect. I bet whoever made those calls was probably some grizzled veteran with decades of experience. Reed's expression shifted subtly. Actually, the commanding officer was 11 years old. Stunned silence filled the room. Zara felt every eye turned toward her, though none of them knew the connection yet. Reed continued his lecture, but she barely heard the words. Her heart was pounding, and she found herself gripping the edge of her workstation. That's impossible, Jake said finally. No 11-year-old could handle that kind of responsibility. The Catherian War changed many things about how we approached military service, Reed replied carefully. When facing extinction, conventional wisdom sometimes proves inadequate. After class, Zara tried to leave quickly, but Reed called her name. Miss Chen, could you stay behind for a moment? The other students filed out, Jake throwing her a curious glance as he passed. When they were alone, Reed activated privacy screens around the classroom. That must have been difficult, he said quietly. Listening to analysis of your own battle. Zara said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. The students don't know, do they? About any of the child commanders who served during the war. It's classified, Zara said finally. The government decided it was better for everyone if that part of the war remained secret. Easier to maintain the fiction that adults were in charge the whole time. Reed nodded grimly. Political necessity. Can't have the public knowing that their salvation came from children who should have been in school instead of commanding fleets. He moved to the star chart, pointing to various systems. There were 47 of you altogether. Child prodigies identified and fast-tracked through command school. Most didn't survive the war. 39 didn't survive. Zara corrected automatically. 8 of us made it through. And now you're trying to be normal teenagers. Reed's voice carried a note of sympathy. How's that working out for you? The question hung in the air. Zara thought about the party, about Jake's casual dominance games, about Maya's well-meaning attempts to help her fit in. Not well. The transition is difficult for all combat veterans, but it's especially hard for people like you. You never had a normal childhood to return to. Reed pulled up a chair sitting across from her. The academy has protocols for helping former child soldiers integrate, but most of it assumes you were ground troops or ship crew, not command-level officers. I don't want special treatment, Zara said quickly. I just want to be normal. Normal. Reed repeated the word as if testing its meaning. What does that look like to you? I don't know. The admission felt like defeat. That's the problem. I don't know how to be anything other than what I was. When other kids were learning social skills and forming friendships, I was learning how to minimize casualties and maximize strategic advantage. Reed was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Can I tell you something about normal, Miss Chen? Normal is overrated. Normal people couldn't have done what you did. Normal people would have let the Catherians win. Normal people wouldn't have had to make the choices I made. No, they wouldn't have. But they also wouldn't have been capable of making them correctly. Reed stood and moved to the window looking out at the academy grounds. The question isn't how to become normal. The question is how to build a life that honors what you've been through while allowing you to move forward. I don't know how to do that either. Neither do I, honestly. But I know that hiding from who you are isn't the answer. Reed turned back to her. That boy, Jake Morrison, he's Admiral Morrison's son. Did you know that? Zara nodded. His father speaks very highly of you. Says you were the finest tactical mind he ever worked with, regardless of age. Reed paused. Jake knows his father served in the war, but he doesn't know about the child commanders. He thinks military heroism looks like what he sees in movies. Gruff veterans with battle scars and gravelly voices. Maybe it's better that way. Maybe. Or maybe he could learn something from understanding that real heroism sometimes comes from unexpected places. Reed gathered his materials. Think about it, Miss Chen. You spent years protecting humanity's future. These students are that future. Perhaps it's time to stop hiding from them and start helping them understand what their freedom really cost. After he left, Zara sat alone in the tactical studies classroom, surrounded by star charts and battle displays. Through the window, she could see students on the academy grounds, talking and laughing and living the carefree lives she'd helped preserve. They had no idea that their peaceful existence had been purchased with the blood of children who'd been forced to grow up too fast. The question Reed had posed echoed in her mind. How do you honor what you've been through while still moving forward? How do you bridge the gap between what you were and what you might become? Outside, she could see Jake Morrison throwing a ball with some friends, his easy confidence and natural leadership obvious even in play. He had no idea that the girl he'd humiliated at the party had once commanded fleets that his father could only dream of. He had no idea that his casual cruelty had been directed at someone who'd sacrificed more for humanity than he could possibly imagine. But maybe that was about to change. The emergency alarm cut through the peaceful afternoon like a blade. Zara shot up from her desk where she'd been attempting to focus on a literature essay about ancient Earth poetry. The sound was different from the Academy's normal bells, sharper, more urgent. Her body responded before her conscious mind caught up, muscle memory from years of combat alerts taking over. Through her dormitory window, she could see students streaming out of buildings in confusion. Most looked annoyed rather than concerned, probably assuming it was just another drill. But Zara noticed details they missed: the way staff members moved with barely controlled panic, the unusual flight patterns of emergency vehicles approaching the academy, the fact that the alarm pattern matched military emergency protocols rather than civilian fire drills. Maya burst into their room, face flushed from running. "Did you hear? There's been some kind of attack on the outer colonies. The news feeds are going crazy and they're saying—" She stopped abruptly when she saw Zara's expression. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Zara was already moving, pulling on shoes and grabbing her emergency kit, habits that ran deeper than conscious thought. "What kind of attack?" "I don't know. The reports are confusing. Something about ships appearing out of nowhere and hitting the mining stations in the Centauri system." Maya's voice carried the edge of someone trying to process information too terrible to fully comprehend. "They're saying it might be them, the Catherians." The bottom dropped out of Zara's world. The Catherians were supposed to be extinct, their civilization crushed in the final battles of the war 3 years ago. She'd personally overseen the destruction of their last major fleet at the Battle of Proxima 7. But if they'd somehow rebuilt, if they'd returned, that's impossible, Zara said automatically. But even as she spoke, her mind was already working through scenarios. Catherian technology was largely biological, capable of regeneration and adaptation. Small survivor groups could have fled to dark space, regrouped, evolved new strategies. The dormitory public address system crackled to life. "All students report to the main auditorium immediately. This is not a drill. Faculty will provide escort and guidance." The auditorium was chaos. Hundreds of students packed together, voices rising in a cacophony of fear, confusion, and speculation. Many were trying to contact family members on outer colonies, their calls either failing to connect or returning automated messages about communication disruptions. Director Williams took the stage, her usually composed demeanor cracked with obvious stress. "Students, please remain calm. We've received reports of attacks on several outer colony installations. The extent and nature of these attacks is still being assessed." "Is it really the Catherians?" someone shouted from the crowd. "We don't have confirmed information about the identity of the attackers," Williams replied, but her hesitation spoke volumes. "What I can tell you is that Earth Defense Command has been activated, and all civilian transport to the outer systems has been suspended." Zara scanned the crowd, noting the different reactions. Some students were crying, worried about family members in the affected systems. Others seemed almost excited, as if this was some kind of adventure rather than a potential catastrophe. Most just looked confused, their sheltered academy lives offering no framework for processing real danger. Jake Morrison stood near the front of the auditorium, surrounded by his usual circle. Unlike the chaos around him, he appeared calm, authoritative. When Williams opened the floor for questions, he was the first to raise his hand. "What about evacuation procedures? If Earth comes under attack, what's the plan for student safety?" It was a good question, the kind of practical inquiry that showed real leadership instincts. For a moment, Zara saw past his social dominance games to something more substantial underneath. "Admiral Morrison's son, indeed. The Academy has comprehensive emergency protocols," Williams answered. "However, Earth Defense Command assures us that our planet's defensive systems are more than adequate to handle any potential threat." Zara almost snorted. Earth's defenses were impressive against conventional attacks, but the Catherians didn't use conventional weapons. Their bioships could adapt to countermeasures, evolve new attack patterns in real time. If they'd learned from their previous defeats. The briefing continued for another 20 minutes, providing little actual information beyond confirmation that something catastrophic was happening in the outer systems. When Williams dismissed them, students scattered in all directions, some heading for communication terminals to try reaching family, others clustering in groups to share rumors and speculation. Zara headed directly for the tactical studies classroom, hoping to find Colonel Reed. She needed access to real intelligence data, not sanitized public reports. The classroom was empty, but she could hear voices from Reed's office next door. Confirmed biological signatures match previous Catherian encounters, Reed was saying into a secure communication terminal. Recommendation is immediate activation of all reserve assets. Understood, Colonel. Stand by for updated orders. The voice on the other end was crisp, military. Be advised that several former child commanders have been recalled to active duty. Zara's breath caught. They were bringing back the child soldiers. The situation must be even worse than the public report suggested. Reed ended the call and turned to find her standing in his doorway. I wondered when you'd show up, he said grimly. I take it you've been monitoring the situation. Is it really them? Bioship configurations, adaptive weapon systems, coordinated multi-vector assault patterns. If it's not the Catherians, it's something that learned their techniques very well. Reed gestured for her to enter his office and closed the door behind her. 7 outer colonies have gone dark in the past 4 hours. The attack patterns suggest a single coordinated strike rather than multiple separate incidents. Zara's mind immediately began processing the tactical implications. They're testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses in our response patterns. The outer colonies are expendable to them. They're gathering intelligence for a larger assault. My assessment exactly. Reed pulled up a holographic display showing the affected systems. Earth Defense Command is mobilizing, but they're treating this like a conventional threat. They don't understand what they're dealing with. What about the other child commanders?
How many are being recalled?
Reed's expression darkened. As of 2 hours ago, they've been able to contact 4 of the 8 survivors. The others are either unreachable or... He didn't finish the sentence, but Zara understood. Some of her former colleagues might not have survived the transition to civilian life. They haven't contacted me. Your file shows you as a student at a civilian academy. They probably don't want to pull you back unless absolutely necessary. Reed studied her face. The question is what you want to do about it. Zara looked at the tactical display, her mind automatically analyzing attack vectors and defensive possibilities. Somewhere out there, humanity was facing the same threat that had nearly destroyed civilization 3 years ago. The same enemy she dedicated her childhood to defeating was back, and the people tasked with stopping them didn't have her experience or insight. But she was just a student now. A 16-year-old girl trying to learn how to be normal, trying to fit in with classmates who'd never faced real danger. Wasn't she entitled to a peaceful life after everything she'd sacrificed? Through Reed's office window, she could see academy students walking across the courtyard, their faces showing the first real fear many of them had ever experienced. These were the people she'd fought to protect. This was the future she'd helped preserve. The choice, when it came down to it, wasn't really a choice at all. The communication came at 0347 hours, cutting through the restless sleep that had plagued the academy for 3 days since the attacks began. Zara was already awake when her personal terminal chimed with an encrypted military priority message. Maya stirred in her bed but didn't wake as Zara quietly accepted the transmission. Admiral Morrison's weathered face appeared on the small screen, looking older than she remembered. Dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. Behind him, she could see the familiar chaos of a military command center during crisis operations. Commander Chen, he said without preamble, using her old rank despite the civilian setting. I apologize for the direct contact, but we're out of time and options. Zara glanced at Maya's sleeping form and moved to the window, speaking quietly. I've been monitoring the situation, sir. How bad is it? Worse than public reports indicate. We've lost 17 colonies in the past 72 hours. The enemy is using new bioship variants we've never encountered. Faster, more adaptable, and completely immune to our conventional countermeasures. Morrison's voice carried the weight of impending defeat. They're not just back, Chen, they've evolved. The tactical implications hit Zara immediately. The Catherians had always been adaptive, but if they'd developed new capabilities during their exile, everything humanity had learned about fighting them might be useless. Current defensive status? Earth Defense Command is throwing everything we have at them, but we're fighting the last war while they're fighting a new one. We've recalled 4 of the surviving child commanders, but... Morrison paused, seeming to age another year in the space of a heartbeat. We lost Commander Torres yesterday. Her ship was destroyed during the defense of Vega Station. Isabella Torres. Zara remembered her as a brilliant strategist with an infectious laugh, who'd somehow maintained optimism even during the darkest days of the war. She'd been 14 when the war ended, just beginning to plan for a normal life. "I'm sorry," Zara said quietly, though the words felt inadequate. "We can't afford to lose any more of you," Morrison continued, "but we also can't afford to fight this war without the tactical advantages you provide. Command has authorized me to request your voluntary return to active duty." Voluntary. The word carried weight in military parlance. They needed her, but they weren't ordering her back. After everything she'd given, they were leaving the choice to her. "What's the strategic situation?" she asked, falling automatically into the analytical mindset that had served her through years of impossible decisions. Morrison activated a holographic display, transmitting tactical data to her terminal. "They're advancing in a coordinated wave toward the core systems, but the attack pattern is unlike anything from the previous war. Instead of seeking decisive battles, they're targeting infrastructure and communication networks. They want to isolate Earth and cut off our ability to coordinate a unified defense." Zara studied the data, her mind immediately recognizing the sophisticated strategy they learned from their previous defeat. "We beat them before by maintaining fleet cohesion and exploiting their overconfidence. Now they're being methodical, patient." "Exactly. And our current commanders don't understand the enemy psychology well enough to counter it effectively." Morrison leaned forward. "Chen, I know what we're asking. I know what you've already sacrificed. But without your insight, without the tactical genius you and the other child commanders brought to the war, I'm not sure we can win this." Through her dormitory window, Zara could see the first light of dawn touching the peaceful Earth landscape. Students would wake soon, attend classes, worry about assignments and social drama. The normal teenage life she'd been trying so hard to build for herself continued just outside her door. "If I agree," she said finally, "what would my role be?" "Fleet Command. We're putting together a task force of our most advanced ships with orders to disrupt their advance while we figure out their new capabilities. It would mean leaving the academy immediately. Leaving the academy. Leaving Maya's friendship and Colonel Reed's guidance. Leaving her painful attempts to fit in with students who had no idea what real responsibility meant. Leaving the chance to discover who she might be beyond the war that had defined her childhood, but also leaving those same students vulnerable to an enemy that had already proven capable of destroying entire worlds. "I need time to think," Zara said. Morrison nodded. "I understand. But don't take too long, Commander. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach the inner systems within a week." The transmission ended, leaving Zara alone with the weight of an impossible choice. Outside, she could hear the academy beginning to wake up, showers running, doors opening and closing, the quiet conversations of students starting another day. Maya stirred and sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Was that a call?" "It's so early. Family," Zara lied smoothly, checking in about the situation. Maya's expression grew concerned. "Are they okay?" "The news reports keep getting worse. Some people are saying Earth might actually be in danger." "They're fine," Zara said, though the words felt hollow. Nobody was fine. Nobody would be fine until this new threat was dealt with. "I'm scared," Maya admitted quietly. "I know I try to act like everything's normal, but I've never been through anything like this. When I was little, my parents told me stories about the Catherian War, but I never thought—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Zara understood. None of these students had thought they'd ever face real danger. They'd grown up in the peace that people like Zara had bought with their childhood and innocence. "Maya," Zara said carefully, "what would you do if you had the power to protect everyone here? But it meant giving up your normal life forever?" Maya considered the question seriously. "I guess I'd hope someone else would step up so I wouldn't have to. But if there really wasn't anyone else," she shrugged. "I mean, what's a normal life worth if everyone you care about gets hurt because you were too selfish to help?" The wisdom in Maya's simple answer struck Zara like a physical blow. Here was someone who'd never faced combat, never made life and death decisions, yet she understood the fundamental equation that had governed Zara's entire military career. What's a normal life worth if everyone you care about gets hurt because you were too selfish to help? Zara spent the day attending classes and going through the motions of being a normal student, but her mind was elsewhere. In calculus, she found herself calculating fleet movement vectors. During lunch, she analyzed the social dynamics of the cafeteria and saw patterns that reminded her of tactical formations. Every interaction felt like preparation for a goodbye she hadn't yet decided to say. That evening, she found Jake Morrison sitting alone outside the dormitories, staring up at the stars. His usual crowd was nowhere to be seen, and his confident demeanor had been replaced by something more vulnerable. "Mind if I sit?" she asked. He looked surprised but nodded. "Free country. For now, anyway." They sat in silence for several minutes, both looking up at the night sky where humanity's enemies moved between the stars, bringing death and destruction closer with each passing hour. "My father called today," Jake said finally. "He's back in active service. First time since the war ended. Are you worried about him?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "He told me something I never knew before. About the war. About who really won it for us." He glanced at her sideways. "You know what's funny? I've spent my whole life trying to live up to his reputation, trying to be the kind of leader he is. But I never understood what real leadership actually costs." Zara waited, sensing there was more. "He said the real heroes of the war were people nobody talks about anymore, people who gave up everything to save everyone else, then disappeared into normal lives because the truth was too difficult for the public to handle." Jake's voice carried a note of wonder and growing understanding. He said some of them were just kids. The moment stretched between them, heavy with implications and unspoken truths. "If those people were still around," Jake continued, "and if humanity needed them again, do you think they'd answer the call?" Zara looked up at the stars, thinking about Isabella Torres and the ship that would never return home, about the students sleeping peacefully in the dormitories behind them, about the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. "Yes," she said quietly, "I think they would." The assembly hall fell silent as Director Williams stepped to the podium, her face grave with the weight of unprecedented news. 2 weeks had passed since the Cytherian attacks began, and the situation had deteriorated beyond anyone's worst fears. 18 colonial systems had gone dark. Earth's outer defenses were crumbling. And for the first time since the original war, the enemy was approaching the core worlds. "Students," Williams began, her voice steady despite the circumstances, "I must inform you that Earth Defense Command has made the difficult decision to activate emergency protocols. All non-essential civilian installations, including this academy, will be evacuated within 72 hours. The reaction was immediate. Gasps, crying, shouts of disbelief. These students had lived their entire lives in safety, protected by the peace that previous sacrifices had secured. The concept of actual evacuation, of Earth itself being threatened, was beyond their experience. Zara sat in the back of the auditorium, watching the chaos unfold with the detached analysis that had become second nature. She'd made her decision 3 days ago but hadn't yet acted on it. The delay wasn't hesitation. It was the simple recognition that once she picked up command again, there would be no coming back to this life. "The evacuation will be conducted in phases," Williams continued, struggling to be heard over the noise. "Students from the outer colonies will be relocated to secured facilities in the inner systems. Earthborn students will be returned to their families. What about the war?" Jake Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. He'd stood up and his natural authority commanded attention even in crisis. "What's being done to stop them?" Williams hesitated. "Earth Defense Command assures us that every possible resource is being deployed." It was a politician's answer, carefully worded to avoid admitting the truth, that humanity's military was failing against an enemy they no longer understood. Zara had been monitoring military communications through Colonel Reed's equipment, and the reports painted a desperate picture. The Cytherians weren't just winning. They were evolving their tactics faster than human forces could adapt. After the assembly, students scattered to pack belongings and contact families. Zara made her way to Reed's office, where she found him coordinating with military command. His face lit up with relief when he saw her. "Thank God you're here. I've been trying to reach you all morning." He gestured to his communication array, which showed tactical displays of the deteriorating situation. Morrison's task force was ambushed at Centauri. They barely escaped with half their ships. Zara studied the data, her trained eye immediately identifying the problem. They're still using conventional fleet tactics against an enemy that adapts in real time. The Cytherians are learning from each engagement faster than our forces can adjust. "Which is why they need you back in command," Reed said urgently. "Chen, I know what you're giving up, but..." "I've already decided," Zara interrupted quietly. "I'm going back." Reed's relief was palpable. "When?" "Now." Zara moved to the communication terminal. "Patch me through to Admiral Morrison on emergency command frequency." As Reed established the connection, Zara caught sight of herself in the darkened window. For just a moment, she saw both versions of herself superimposed. The uncertain teenager who'd spent 2 months trying to fit in at the academy, and the fleet commander who'd helped save civilization. Soon, only one of those people would remain. Morrison's image appeared on the screen, his expression shifting from surprise to profound relief when he saw her. "Commander Chen, I was beginning to think, I'm ready to resume active duty, sir," Zara said formally. "Request immediate transport to fleet headquarters." "Granted. A shuttle will reach the academy within 2 hours." Morrison leaned forward. "Chen, I won't lie to you. The situation is worse than when we last spoke. The enemy has capabilities we never anticipated. We're fighting blind against an opponent that seems to know our every move." "Then it's time to remind them why they lost the first war," Zara replied with quiet confidence. "Request permission to review all tactical data during transport. Already prepared." "And Chen?" Morrison's voice carried a note of personal gratitude. "Thank you. I know what this cost you." The connection ended, leaving Zara alone with Reed in the quiet office. Outside, she could hear students calling to each other as they prepared for evacuation, their voices carrying fear and uncertainty about an unknown future. "I should pack," Zara said, then realized how absurd that sounded. She owned almost nothing of real value, and where she was going, civilian possessions would be meaningless. Reed stood and moved to a secure cabinet, withdrawing a sealed package. "Actually, I have something for you." He handed her the package with formal ceremony. "Your original service decorations and rank insignia. I've been keeping them safe." Zara's hands trembled slightly as she opened the package. Inside were the symbols of everything she'd been before coming to the academy. Her commander's rank insignia, her combat ribbons, her Medal of Honor from the Battle of Kepler Station. Touching them felt like reconnecting with a part of herself she'd tried to leave behind. "There's something else," Reed continued. "The students don't know who you really are, but they deserve to understand what real leadership looks like. With your permission, I'd like to tell them." Zara considered this carefully. "After I'm gone?" "After you're gone," Reed confirmed. "They should know that their safety was protected by someone who walked among them, someone who chose to sacrifice her normal life rather than let them face danger." A knock on the office door interrupted them. Maya entered hesitantly, her face showing the strain of the past weeks. "Sorry to bother you, but I couldn't find Zara anywhere." "Her things are still in our room, but—" She stopped when she saw Zara at the communication terminal. "What's going on?" For a moment, Zara considered lying, maintaining the fiction for just a little longer, but Maya deserved better than that. "I'm leaving the academy." "Leaving? But the evacuation isn't until—" Maya's eyes moved to the military insignia in Zara's hands, and understanding dawned slowly. "Oh my God, you're military. You're going back to fight." "Something like that." Maya stared at her, seeing her roommate in an entirely new light. "How old are you?" "Really? 16. Same as you. But you've served before, during the war." It wasn't a question. Maya's voice carried growing amazement as pieces fell into place. "That's why you're so different. That's why you always seemed like you were carrying some huge weight." Zara nodded, unable to find words that would adequately explain the gulf between their experiences. "Were you important? In the war, I mean," Reed answered when Zara remained silent. She was one of the most decorated fleet commanders in human history. The strategies she developed saved millions of lives. Maya sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "And you've been pretending to be a normal student this whole time? Sitting through algebra classes and cafeteria drama?" "I was trying to be normal," Zara said quietly. "I wanted to find out who I might be if I wasn't defined by war." "Did you? Find out, I mean." Zara thought about the question seriously. She thought about quiet mornings in the dormitory, about failed attempts to understand teenage social politics, about the simple pleasure of reading books that weren't tactical manuals. She thought about Maya's friendship and Jake's grudging respect and Colonel Reed's patient guidance. "Yes," she said finally. "I found out that normal is precious because it's fragile, and that some things are worth protecting even if it means you can never have them yourself." The shuttle's approach was announced over the Academy's communication system. Zara gathered her few belongings and pinned her rank insignia to her jacket, feeling the familiar weight of authority settling back onto her shoulders. Maya walked with her to the landing pad, where other students had gathered to watch the unusual military transport. Jake Morrison stood at the front of the crowd, his expression showing new understanding as he took in Zara's uniform and rank markers. "Commander," he said formally as she passed, offering a crisp salute that she returned with equal precision. The shuttle pilot was a young officer who clearly recognized her reputation. "Commander Chen, it's an honor, ma'am. Fleet Command is standing by for your arrival." As Zara boarded the shuttle, she turned for one last look at the academy, where she'd spent 2 months trying to be someone she wasn't. Maya stood at the front of the crowd, tears streaming down her face, but her expression filled with pride and wonder. The shuttle lifted off, carrying Zara away from the first normal life she'd ever attempted, and toward the war that would define humanity's future. Below, the academy grew smaller until it was just another building in the peaceful Earth landscape she was flying away to protect. On the tactical display in front of her, fleet positions updated in real time, showing the desperate struggle taking place among the stars. The Catherians were advancing steadily toward Earth, confident in their new capabilities and adapted strategies. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't ships or technology, it was the willingness of individuals to sacrifice everything for something larger than themselves. Commander Zara Chen was going to war again, and this time, she understood exactly what she was fighting for. The child who had saved civilization was about to remind the galaxy why humanity refused to surrender.